Coffee Break with Jimmy. That's this hit the Supreme Court today about whether men can play in transgender men can play in women's sports. I think that's all ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous that it's made it to the Supreme Court. Actually, the Supreme Court actually has better things to discuss and to work out than. I mean, this is kind of a thing that people should know this automatically. Men are men, and women are women. Girls are girls, boys are boys. The whole analogy. Now, okay, I've talked to you about. I know I've mentioned before about that girl I grew up with that thought she was a tomboy, and she acted like a tomboy. And her parents she's just a tomboy. She likes to play with the boys. She likes to hang out with the boys. And that's all fine and good. But she did turn out to be a beautiful woman, had a couple of kids, married a friend of mine, actually. And, she turned out like a normal girl should. But they have that sort of thing. And there are boys that are a little bit softer. They're not quite as, I don't know, we want to call them masculine or have that masculinity. And they are maybe not so. Maybe not so. There are some athletes. Like I know that one guy that beat Riley Gaines in swimming. This guy seemed to be a little more masculine, but he wasn't a very good men's swimmer. He wasn't in the top of the categories in men's swimming. So he decided that he was going to be a girl and he was going to compete against the girls, which I thought was totally wrong. You could tell he was a regular guy. But that's what this is all based on. I guess Idaho, they have a case there in Idaho and one in I don't know if it's Virginia or Virginia. Anyway, I guess it's based on, we've got 27 states that feel like men should compete in women's sports and 23 of them that actually do. A lot of the states that actually think men can compete in women's sports are, well, for not a better reason, they're blue states. Okay, they have. They're also the ones that have. They're Democrats. Okay, by and large, this is what they believe, and this kind of comes down to just about everything that the Democrats believe in. Okay, these are sanctuary states, sanctuary cities. Like the fraud that's going on in Minnesota. That's been going on for some time now, but it's been swept underneath the rug. They've actually been investigating that for a little bit of time, but it's been swept underneath the rug. I guess Ellison, the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota, hasn't done much, even though it's been presented to him. He hasn't done anything about it. Neither has the governor, or for that matter, or the mayor of Minneapolis. Apparently, they're going to talk about a little bit more about this tomorrow. But this stuff that's hit the Supreme Court about should, these transgender men play in women's sports, it's so ridiculous. In this Ketanji Brown Jackson Lee or whatever, that she's a justice on the Supreme Court, nominated by President Biden, if you want to call him that. Anyway. They asked her a question here. It's been a couple of years, but they asked her a question. Could she define a woman? And she couldn't define what a woman was. And here she is, a woman herself. I mean, come on. You got two genders. You got male and female. Personally, I don't have a problem with males, some males, a little bit on the softer side, I guess. I don't know. Maybe not so much softer side, but they like other males, so they become gay. Then you got women that are lesbians that like women. They don't like men. I think both of them, they're missing out. Okay, the idea of men and women being together. I mean, that's just the greatest thing. I still say the greatest thing God ever created was woman, and that's always been my stance on that. And because I think all women are beautiful, and some of them say, well, you know what? In their own rights, they're all beautiful, and I think they all have their rights, and the rights to compete in sports. Okay, Justice, what was her name? She's that justice was just appointed by Trump, Barrett. Okay, she mentioned something today that I thought was. I think it would be crucial if you look at from when it starts and how it kind of develops. But when boys and girls are 5, 6 years old and they're out there playing in the playground, well, they play with one another. They know they're boys and girls, and they play with each other. And even some of the girls are just as tough or tougher than the boys are. And that I can remember that when I was a kid. And then somewhere along the lines, when you get to being around 8, 9 years old. I know we started Little League at that time, and because it was a boys' Little League, and then girls had softball. They played softball. And even though even when they grow up, you have co-ed softball, where you have co-ed for men and women. But there's been times where women have gotten actually hurt in playing softball. You really don't get hurt playing softball, but women have gotten hurt from softball. Because some of the guys that on this co-ed softball teams hit the ball pretty hard. They throw the ball pretty hard. So there's been some injuries over the years. Because I played softball for a long time, but I just played men's softball. But so you have that where they play together. But when you have sports that are competitive, especially in high school and college, and you have women's sports, they need to be just women, not transgenders. And I think that's what they said. There's like one, not even 1/10 of 1% that's transgender. You can make their own category, but there's not going to be that many going to do that. They want to do this. The men that want to be transgender, say they're women, they take these testosterone blockers and whatnot to try to make them more like a woman. They're still not a woman. They're still a man. And some of them, that volleyball, that transgender man playing volleyball that broke that one girl's eye socket by slamming a volleyball in her face. Now that could happen with men too. You can say that can happen either way, but it didn't. Okay, so I think personally, the Supreme Court hasn't come up with their conclusions yet with this, but I think it should be 9-0, except that Ketanji Brown Jackson Lee, or whatever her name is. I don't think she's going to vote that way. I think she's going to probably vote for the transgender, but a lot of states feel that way. And by and large, these are the blue states, the sanctuary states, sanctuary cities. Same thing with all the fraud that's going on. A lot of the fraud that's going on. There are some in the Republican states, and make no mistake about it, there are Republicans that are committing fraud also. And we're going to get to the bottom of it. And that's what President Trump, that's what he's planning on doing. And so that's just something that's happening here domestically. There's so much going on. I did a podcast on Iran yesterday, and how, we could help Iran, but we need to leave. We don't need to have any Iranians wanting to get. They need to stay in their country. Okay, you can't claim asylum there now, and because I do personally. You want to fight for your country, stay there and fight for your country. In some form or fashion, we will help them out. I know they will. I know we will. As the mullahs came into Iran back when I was in the Marine Corps, and I remember they kidnapped all those students that were in Iran, and that's when it all started. It's back in '78 and '79. And I think it's probably going to be come to their end. And of course they keep saying things to Trump, and I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. The jury's still out on that. The jury's still out on this. Well, not the jury, but the Supreme Court is still out on this transgender being able to compete these in women's sports, and I think we ought to leave that alone. Title IX, they fought for that years ago, and I think it should stay that way. So anyway, Democrats, please. And we talked about California too, and all the fraud is going on in California. I think you Democrats here in California, you can see what's going on. We're gonna eventually have voter ID, and if we get voter ID here in California, I think we might get somebody. We might get a Republican. We might get somebody that can actually run this state and stop the fraud that's going on here. With what's happening with the homeless, what's happening with the bullet train. And we could talk about several other items here in the state of California, but there's just so much going on. But we have to wait and see what the Supreme Court and see how it's going to weigh in. I believe it should be 9-0. It should be, but we'll see what happens there. So anyway, there's a little bit more to talk about. This is Coffee Break with Jimmy. Please subscribe, hit that notification bell, and so next time I'm on, you'll hear me, and share and press the like button, please. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.